Welcome to Reformed Thinking. So, if you break your arm, the X-ray shows this jagged white line, right?
Right, yeah, and the doctor just points right to it.
Yeah, and it's like broken or not broken. It's clean. It's comforting in a weird way.
Because it's visible. You can categorize it.
Yes, we like physical problems because they make sense. But what happens when you step into the world of human morality or temptation and all the things that just ruin our lives?
Suddenly that X-ray machine is just totally useless.
It really is. I mean, we look out at our modern world and we see this absolute obsession with victimhood.
Oh, everywhere. It's everywhere.
It's a culture entirely built on external blame. This idea that, well, bad circumstances make us do bad things. But today, our mission on this deep dive is a forensic examination of human temptation and sin.
And we are basing this on a really rigorous exegetical, historical, and theological breakdown of James chapter 1.
Specifically verses 14 and 15. Because the Apostle James, he steps into this diagnostic muddy water with a piercing surgical truth.
He really does.
He does not point to your circumstances or your boss or, like, your biology. He locates the true executioner right inside our own hearts.
The surgical precision of James is staggering. I mean, he removes every single false comfort we cling to.
Yeah, he takes no prisoners.
Right. When you read those two verses, you are just stripped of all your usual defenses. James forces a mirror in front of the human soul, and he just refuses to let us look away.
It's uncomfortable.
Very. He diagnoses the root cause of all our misery and, well, all our rebellion. It is not an environmental issue. It is an internal, structural corruption.
Which means the stakes for you listening right now could not be higher.
Yeah.
I mean, understanding this text is the literal difference between living in a self-justifying delusion and experiencing genuine, grace-driven freedom.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we have this primordial defense mechanism embedded in us, which is transferring guilt.
Oh, yeah. We treat our moral failures like catching a cold from the weather.
Right. Rather than a genetic condition we were born with, I look at the news, I look at modern therapy, and the conversation is always centered on socioeconomic environmentalism.
Or biological determinism.
Yes. The premise is always that the world is broken, and, well, the world broke me. But this habit of pointing the finger, it goes all the way back to the beginning of human history.
It goes back to the very first moments after the fall in Eden. I mean, the ink was not even dry on human history before the blame shifting began.
It was immediate.
It was. God asks Adam what he has done, and Adam immediately points his finger. He says, "The woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me fruit of the tree, and I ate."
Which is such a crazy response if you think about it.
It is. And notice the subtle strategy there. Adam is not just blaming Eve. He is indirectly indicting God.
Yeah, he's basically saying, if you had not put this woman here, I would be totally fine.
Right. The environment you created caused me to fall. And then Eve turns around and blames the serpent.
It's just a chain of deflection.
From that exact moment, humanity has desperately sought to transfer the burden of guilt outward. We want to believe we are a pristine slate. You know, a clean canvas ruined by a messy world.
That myth of the innocent slate is just everywhere today. I mean, in preparation for this deep dive, we looked at the 2024 State of Theology survey by Ligonier Ministries.
And those numbers are shocking.
Staggering. 67% of Americans agree with the statement that everyone is born innocent in the eyes of God.
2/3.
Yeah. That means a massive majority of the country believes infants enter the world completely pure with a totally clean slate, and then society corrupts them later on.
Which is entirely unbiblical.
And what is far more alarming is that a concerning number of professing evangelicals agreed with that statement too. People sitting in pews every Sunday think human nature starts off neutral.
Well, what's fascinating here is that this statistic reveals something intrinsic about our fallen nature. We just assume our default state is innocence.
Right.
Theologically, we categorize this cultural assumption as Pelagianism.
Pelagianism. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so Pelagianism is essentially the default religion of the natural man. It is the belief that human nature is fundamentally untainted by original sin.
Quote?
Pelagius taught that we are fully capable of choosing good or evil on our own steam without any divine intervention because, well, we do not inherit a corrupt nature from Adam.
So under that view, Adam just set a bad example.
That is it. Adam just set a bad example, but we are born with the same neutral will he had before the fall.
Wow.
And even within the church, historically, you see this impulse mutate into various theological errors just to soften the blow of our own corruption.
I need to push back on that for a second, or at at least ask for some translation here.
Sure.
When you say theological errors that soften the blow, what do those look like in a practical sense? Because the average person listening might think, well, I do not know who Pelagius is, so I am in the clear.
Right, right.
But you are saying this mindset sneaks into church doctrine in other ways. So how does this show up in systems that people might actually recognize?
Think about the system of Arminianism. In its attempt to guard human responsibility and avoid the absolute sovereignty of God in salvation, it assumes a sort of moral neutrality of the will.
Okay, so it softens the fall.
Yes. It proposes that the human will can simply choose righteousness or choose sin at any given moment, totally independent of a prior sovereign work of God to change the heart.
So it puts the control back in our hands.
It flatters the sinner by suggesting they hold the deciding vote in their spiritual state. It tells you that your will is sick, perhaps, but not dead.
Ah, sick but not dead. That's a huge distinction.
It is. Then you look at Roman Catholicism. They have a dogmatic formulation regarding original sin that claims inherent concupiscence.
And concupiscence is just a big word for what?
It is that internal tilt or inclination towards sin.
Okay.
They say that inclination is not actually sin in and of itself until explicit behavioral consent is granted.
Wait, really? So just wanting to sin isn't a sin to them?
Right. They say the lingering desire to rebel is like a tinderbox, but it is not technically a sin until you strike the match.
Oh, wow.
Both of these systems provide a false cushion for the conscience. They tell you that your internal wiring is either neutral or, at the very least, not legally condemnable until you physically act out.
That distinction is just huge. You are saying we want to define sin purely as an action we take rather than a condition we possess.
Yes.
Why is the human conscience so desperate for that false cushion? I mean, we seem terrified of admitting that the call is coming from inside the house.
We really are.
We will do all sorts of psychological gymnastics to avoid saying, I am the problem.
Well, because if the problem is external, then the solution is manageable.
Oh, that makes sense.
Right. If my environment makes me sin, I just need a better environment. If my biology is the issue, I need better medication.
Right. If my lack of education is the root cause, I just need better schooling.
Exactly that. If the problem is just that I make bad choices sometimes, I can fix that with a self-improvement program.
A podcast, a book, whatever.
But if the problem is an executioner living inside my own breast, a fundamental corruption of my very nature, then I am entirely helpless.
Which is terrifying.
It is. I cannot fix myself. I cannot educate myself out of a dead heart. I am cast entirely upon the mercy of a holy God. And, the natural man hates being helpless. The natural man wants to be the captain of his own soul.
So to understand how James shatters this false cushion, we really have to look at who he was talking to and the agonizing pressure they were under.
The context is everything here.
It is. Here's where it gets really interesting. James, the brother of Jesus, a pillar of the Jerusalem church, is writing this letter very early on. We're talking 80, 45 to 48.
Very early. Likely the first New Testament book written?
Yeah. And he addresses it to the 12 tribes in the dispersion. Now, these are Jewish believers who have essentially lost everything. They are completely displaced.
The crucible they were in was unimaginable for most of us today.
What were they actually dealing with?
Well, following the martyrdom of Stephen, a massive wave of persecution swept through Jerusalem. These believers were just driven from their homes.
Like refugees.
Yes, they were scattered across the Roman Empire into places like Syria and Asia Minor. They lost their livelihoods, their property, their social standing.
They'd lost it all.
When you read through the letter, James outlines the specific, brutal realities they were enduring. They were facing intense economic exploitation.
Right.
Wealthy landowners were defrauding them, holding back their wages. And you have to remember, in an agrarian society, if a day laborer does not get paid at sunset, his family does not eat that night.
They just starve.
They faced violent marginalization and corrupt courts that favored the rich aristocrats. They were living as refugees, trying to maintain their faith while watching their children go hungry.
All while the people oppressing them were living in luxury.
Yes.
I am thinking about the psychology of that situation. Let's put ourselves in their shoes for a minute. If you are losing your home, if you are being oppressed by corrupt politicians and greedy landowners, isn't it entirely logical to view your anger, your bitterness, or your moral compromises as excusable reactions to a terrible situation?
It feels very justified.
I mean, who would blame a man for losing his temper when his wages are stolen right to his face? It is so easy to justify stealing bread when your kids are starving.
Right.
It's so easy to justify hating the man who dragged you into court and took your land. You would think James would write a letter of pure comfort, telling them they are victims and they get a pass for their behavior.
You would think so, but if we connect this to the bigger picture, we see why James structures his letter the way he does. The literary flow of James chapter 1 is a masterpiece of pastoral care and theological correction.
How does he start it?
In verses 2 through 12, James addresses the external circumstances. He tells them to count it all joy when they meet trials of various times.
Which sounds insane to a starving person.
It does, but he validates their suffering. He just frames it through the lens of God's sovereign providence. God is using these fiery trials to test their faith, to burn away the dross, and to produce steadfastness.
So the trial has a purpose.
God designs the trial for their holiness. He does not dismiss their pain. He elevates their pain by showing them that God is using it like a refiner's fire to purify their faith.
But James knows human nature. He knows they're going to take that theology of God's sovereignty and twist it to excuse their own sin.
He absolutely anticipates their defense mechanism. So in verse 13, he draws an absolute unyielding boundary.
What does he say?
He commands the believer never to say, I am being tempted by God. He shifts from the external trial to the internal solicitation to do evil.
Okay, because the human mind is so prone to make a fatal logical leap there.
Very prone.
We think God sovereignly ordained this terrible situation. This terrible situation makes me so angry I want to seek violent revenge. Therefore, God is the author of my sinful anger.
Yes. And James shuts that down immediately. God tests for holiness, but he never tempts with evil. The holy God cannot solicit rebellion against himself. He provides the test, but he does not bait the hook.
I want to pause here and look at a historical debate that I think is highly relevant, because it shows how people have misunderstood James for centuries.
Oh, the liberal scholarship stuff.
Yeah. There has been a lot of noise, particularly from liberal critical scholarship, like F.C. Bauer and the Tübingen School back in the 19th century.
Yes.
They created this narrative that James and the Apostle Paul were in a theological cage match.
It's ridiculous.
It is. They claim that James is writing this legalistic pushback against Paul's doctrine of justification by faith alone. They really try to pit the two apostles against each other.
That entire premise from the Tübingen School must be firmly repudiated. It is a total misunderstanding of both Paul and James, and it reads a false conflict into the text.
They aren't fighting.
They are not in conflict at all. They are in organic harmony. Paul is in the trenches defending the ground of our justification before the bar of God's justice.
Which is the imputed righteousness of Christ alone, received through faith alone.
Right. Paul is arguing against legalists who think they can earn salvation by works. James, on the other hand, is fighting a different battle on the exact same front.
Okay, what's his battle?
James is defending the character of that justifying faith before the eyes of the world. He is dealing with a suffering church that is in danger of using their trials as an excuse for antinomianism, which means lawlessness.
Oh, I see.
They are tempted to say, we have faith, so our behavior does not matter. Our circumstances are too hard for us to live holy lives right now, but God understands because we believe.
Wow. And James is not having it.
Not at all. James is saying that a faith which produces no fruit of holiness under pressure is a dead, spurious faith. True faith survives the fire.
So if God does not author the temptation, and these crushing circumstances, as terrible as they are just the stage setting, where does the actual lure come from?
Good question.
If the trial is just the environment, where is the assassin hiding? This brings us to verse 14, where James uses this vivid hunting metaphor to answer the question.
Yes, verse 14.
He says, but each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. He isolates the individual. He says, each one, there is nowhere to hide. He points the finger right at your own chest.
And the Greek phrasing James uses here is clinical in its precision. The source of the temptation is his own desire, and the Greek word there is epithymia.
Epithymia.
Yes, this is the absolute root of the issue. When we look at how Hellenistic philosophers wrote back then, they often separated the different faculties of the human mind.
How so?
Well, James deliberately avoids certain words. He does not use thelema, which refers to the intellect.
Okay.
And he does not use belesis, which refers to rational deliberation. If he had used those words, he would have been suggesting that sin is a highly rational, calculated decision made by a neutral mind weighing pros and cons in a vacuum.
Wait, explain that. Are you saying we do not think our way into sin? We usually picture temptation as, a devil on one shoulder and an angel on the other, and we rationally listen to both arguments before making a choice.
That is the cartoon version, yes. But by using epithymia, James shows that the affections, the internal cravings, are structurally corrupted before the mind even has a chance to reason.
The desire itself is broken.
It is a disordered longing. The mind is often just the lawyer hired to justify what the heart already wants.
Well, that's good. The lawyer hired by the heart.
And James pairs this with terrifying, violent imagery from ancient woodcraft and angling. He uses the word exulco, which means being dragged out from a hiding place,
Dragged out.
and deliezo, which means to bait a hook. Extra-biblical writers like Plato and Xenophon use these exact same terms to describe how passion completely overthrows reason. You are dragged out of the safety of God's law by your own cravings.
So what does this all mean for us practically? Let me use a fishing analogy to make sure I'm grasping the mechanics of this.
Go for it.
You drop a line into the water with lure on it. The fish swims toward the bait, not because it has a conscious desire for death or a hook through its jaw.
No, of course not.
It swims toward the bait because its appetite is utterly deceived by the disguise of nourishment. The bait promises life. It looks like a juicy worm.
Yes.
But here's the kicker. Bait is completely useless to a fish without an appetite for it. You can drop the most expensive lure in the world into a pool. But if the fish has no biological craving for what that lure represents, it will not bite. The fish provides the vulnerability.
What's fascinating here is the deceptive action of desire in our own lives. Sin rarely, if ever, presents itself as destruction.
It never looks bad at first.
Never. It does not knock on your door and say, hello, I'm here to ruin your marriage, destroy your career, and alienate you from God.
No, we slam the door.
Exactly. It comes disguised as a solution to your current pain. It presents itself as freedom. It presents itself as justice. It presents itself as much-needed relief. The angry man believes his outburst is righteous vindication against a cruel boss. The employee padding their expense report believes their theft is a rebalancing of unfair corporate economics.
We justify it.
The spouse seeking comfort outside their marriage believes an affair is finally finding true intimacy and being understood. The human will is not a neutral bystander observing options.
No.
It is a self-segregating captive, lured out of the safety of God's commands by its own corrupt passions.
We are our own worst enemies, in the most literal sense. We provide the appetite for the devil's bait. Satan does not have to force us into anything.
He really doesn't.
He just has to figure out what flavor of bait our epithymia craves and drop it in the water.
Just drop it in and wait.
And once that prey takes the bait, James moves from the woods and the water into something even more disturbing.
He shifts metaphors.
Yes, in verse 15, he outlines this horrifying organic process with clinical medical precision. We move into a biological metaphor. It is the genealogy of death.
The shift is marked by the temporal conjunction then, the Greek word ida. Yes. This word signifies a mechanical, sequential progression. It is an unavoidable chain reaction. We are no longer talking about hunters and fish. We are in the realm of obstetrics.
Obstetrics.
James writes, "Then desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death." He maps out the life cycle of a rebellion.
I was looking at the original language here before we recorded, and it is actually kind of disturbing. He stops talking about fishing and shifts into this dark terminology. It reads like a twisted family tree.
It really does.
Walk us through the syntactical progression here, because the words he chooses are so specific, and they build on each other in a really terrifying way.
First, desire conceives. James uses a classical medical term for pregnancy here. Desire acts as an illicit spouse that seduces the human will.
Okay.
Once the will consents to that corrupt desire, a spiritual conception takes place. The union of your will and your corrupt affection creates a new entity.
A new entity.
Then it gives birth, the Greek word tikte, to actual transgression. This is the outward visible act of sin. The thought becomes an action.
So it moves from the inside to the outside.
Yes. But the lineage does not stop there. Sin then matures or becomes full-grown, translating the word apotolestesa.
Potolistisa.
It reaches its completion, it establishes a pattern, it builds a stronghold in your life, and finally, it violently spawns or whelps death.
Whelps. Spawns. Those are strong, ugly words.
It is the Greek word apoke. It is a highly visceral, graphic word. It is not the word you use for a beautiful human birth in a bright, joyous delivery room.
No, it sounds animalistic.
Because it refers to the raw, animalistic spawning of beasts, Contrast this with verse 18, just a few lines later, where James talks about how God brings us forth by the word of truth.
Totally different tone.
God grants a noble, beautiful birth to his children, but sin behaves like a parasite. It violently spawns death. And we must be clear, this is not just physical death. Physical death is part of it, but James is warning about eternal, judicial separation from the presence of God under his holy wrath. The end result of unchecked desire is hell.
Wait, I have to push back here. This makes it sound like there's no such thing as a minor sin.
Oh, there isn't.
But if every single passing thought, every little spark of desire is a potential conception of a beast that spawns death, how do we function? That sounds like a recipe for absolute paralyzing anxiety.
I can see how it feels that way.
Are we just supposed to walk around terrified of our own brains?
Yeah.
How can anyone survive if a fleeting moment of envy or a quick flash of anger carries the death penalty?
That is a very natural reaction to the absolute severity of God's law. When we finally see the standard, it is crushing.
It is.
But we have to understand the organic nature of sin. Think of an acorn. An acorn is not a 60-foot oak tree. You can hold it in the palm of your hand. You can crush it under your heel. It looks harmless. But the full DNA of the massive oak tree is contained within that tiny acorn. If planted, if watered, if allowed to follow its natural biological progression, it will become an oak.
That's a sobering thought.
Unmortified desire is structurally bound to mature into eternal condemnation. Sin is never static. It is never just resting in your heart. It always aims at total mastery over the host.
Always.
So no, there are no minor sins in their nature, only in their current stage of development. The seed of murder is in a moment of bitter anger. The seed of adultery is in a lingering glance.
That terrifying internal diagnosis leaves you and me completely stripped of any defense. If our own desires are the assassins and they are already inside the house, how can anyone survive?
You can't. Not on your own.
We cannot trust our own intellect. We cannot trust our own affections. We cannot trust our own will. This feels like a locked room where the walls are closing in and the air is running out.
Yes.
If our own biology is rigged to spawn death, we are a lost cause. Someone from the outside has to break the sequence.
It is supposed to feel that way. James is driving us to the end of ourselves so that we look up. The law always functions as a schoolmaster to drive us to Christ.
Bring us to the end of our rope.
Right. James is setting up the massive contrast between the fatal lineage of human desire and the absolute purity of Jesus Christ, the second Adam. We need a champion who can step into the arena of human temptation and defeat it completely.
Okay, let's talk about Jesus in this context, because this brings up something I have always wanted to clarify.
Sure.
Hebrews chapter 4, verse 15 says that Jesus was tempted in every respect as we are, yet without sin.
Yes.
But if temptation involves this internal conception, this epithemia rising up to meet the bait,
Yeah.
how did Jesus avoid that?
Ah.
Did he feel the pull of the bait? Did he have to wrestle down his own corrupt desires?
Yeah.
Because if he did, that makes him sound just like us, struggling with an internal executioner.
This is a crucial theological distinction that guards the absolute sinlessness of Christ.
Yeah.
Jesus had no internal epithemia in the corrupt sense.
None at all.
He was fully human, yes, but he was conceived by the Holy Spirit and born without original sin. He had no internal concupiscence.
The tinderbox we talked about earlier.
Right, he didn't have it. In John 14:30, Jesus says, "The ruler of this world is coming. He has no claim on me," or in older translations, "He has nothing in me."
He has nothing in me.
Jesus had no dry tinder in his holy soul for Satan's sparks to ignite. He possessed a completely pure, unfallen human nature.
So when Satan tempted him in the wilderness for 40 days, how was that a real temptation if Jesus didn't have the internal mechanism to take the bait?
When the devil offered the bait in the wilderness, the bait was entirely external. Satan said, "Command these stones to become bread."
Right.
Satan offered him all the kingdoms of the world in exchange for an act of worship. Now, Jesus had natural, sinless human desires. He had biological hunger after fasting for 40 days.
Which is normal.
It is not a sin to be hungry. He had a righteous desire to rule the nations, which was promised to him by the Father. It is not a sin to desire your rightful inheritance.
Of course not.
But there was no corrupt desire to satisfy that hunger or claim that kingdom in rebellion against the Father's timing and the Father's will. The bait was dangled right in front of his face. But Christ's holy soul had zero appetite for the hook.
Zero appetite.
He faced the full, concentrated fury of external temptation, far beyond anything we will ever face, because he never gave in. He endured the maximum pressure of temptation and repelled it completely.
This connects so perfectly to the covenant of grace
Ah,
and the framework we find in documents like the Westminster Confession.
they really do.
Chapter 5, Section 4 of the Confession talks about God's holy providence extending to the sins of men, yet God is never the author of sin.
Yeah.
Jesus steps into this framework to do what Adam failed to do in a perfect garden and what we failed to do every single day in a broken world.
Yes,
He enters the exact same environment of trial, but he brings a perfect obedience.
exactly. Or, well, spot on. We speak of Christ's obedience in two distinct categories, active and passive.
Break those down for us.
His active obedience refers to him flawlessly fulfilling the law of God throughout his entire earthly life. He never once allowed desire to conceive sin.
Not even a single thought.
He loved the Lord his God with all his heart, soul, mind, and strength every single second of his life. He provided a garment of perfect righteousness for his elect.
And the passive obedience.
Then you have his passive obedience, which refers to his suffering and death. Remember the genealogy of death from James? The sequence that ends with sin spawning death?
Yeah, the terrible biological chain.
Jesus stepped directly into the path of that biological certainty. He had no sin of his own to spawn death, but he willingly absorbed the unmitigated stroke of death that was spawned by our transgressions.
Wow.
The wages of sin is death, and Christ took the absolute fullness of those wages upon himself on the cross.
This raises an urgent question for the listener. If Christ has accomplished all of this, if he has fulfilled the law and paid the penalty, how does it actually become ours?
How do we apply it?
Yeah, how do we get victory over this internal executioner today in the middle of our own trials and temptations? Because I am still dealing with epithemia right now. I still have those cravings.
The answer is monergistic regeneration.
Monergistic regeneration.
That is a theological phrase that means God works alone to bring about the new birth. Christ does not just look down from heaven, offer forgiveness, and say, now try harder to fight your desires.
Oh, look out there.
Right, that would be cruelty. If he left us with our old nature, we would just keep spawning death. Through the Holy Spirit, he performs this sovereign, unilateral work of new birth.
Completely new heart.
He takes out the heart of stone and gives a heart of flesh. He gives a new will, new affections, and breaks the absolute dominion of that genealogy of death.
So we aren't slaves to it anymore.
You are no longer a helpless slave to epithemia. You still have lingering sin, you still face temptation, but you have the Spirit of the living God dwelling inside you, providing the power to actually fight back. The sequence is broken.
Which means the believer is not left in despair, but is called to rigorous, aggressive action on the battlefield of daily life.
We have to fight.
Because Christ has conquered the grave and provided a new heart, we actually have the capacity to fight. We have a job to do. This brings us to the pastoral application of all this heavy theology.
Yes.
The great Puritan John Owen famously wrote, "Be killing sin, or sin will be killing you. It is a fight to the death."
Owen understood James perfectly. The Christian life requires constant, unyielding vigilance, and this completely shatters so much of modern church practice.
Oh, totally.
When you understand the lethal nature of unmortified desire, you have to reject these seeker-sensitive, pragmatic church growth models.
The ones that just cater to what people want.
You cannot treat the unregenerate desires of people as neutral market indicators to be entertained. You cannot look at a community and ask, what does the flesh want? And then build a worship service to cater to that desire.
Because you're just feeding the beast.
If you do that, you are essentially feeding the very beast that wants to spawn death in your congregation. You are handing out bait.
And on the flip side, you have to reject these modern mystical spiritual warfare movements. You see this a lot on social media.
Oh, yes.
Where people bypass all personal accountability by blaming their moral failures on territorial demons or ancestral curses.
It's just another form of blame shifting.
It is. They teach that your anger issue is an anger demon and your lust issue is a lust demon that needs to be cast out. I always think blaming a territorial demon for your temper or your greed is like looking for a monster under the bed when the real threat is already sitting in the living room holding the television remote.
That's a great way to put it.
You are the threat.
It is a brilliant distraction tactic by the enemy. If you are busy yelling at an imaginary territorial demon casting out spirits over your city, you are not doing the hard, painful work of crucifying the lust in your own heart.
You're distracted.
James leaves no room for gimmicks. Your primary problem is not a spirit hovering over your neighborhood. Your primary problem is your own unmortified desire. The call is coming from inside the house.
So what are the practical aggressive steps for the listener? If the enemy is inside, How do we actually fight this day to day?
You have to interrogate your desires upstream. Do not wait until the imagination is fully fed and the will is actively negotiating a compromise.
You can't wait until you're on the edge.
Do not wait until you are standing on the edge of the cliff to decide if gravity is real. You must catch the desire while it is still a passing thought, and you must stop using therapeutic euphemisms for your sin.
What do you mean by that?
Do not say, I have a personality flaw where I get frustrated under pressure. Say, I have a lethal monster of wrath that wants to murder my family's peace.
Wow, that hits hard.
Do not say, I struggle with visual temptations on my phone. Say, I desire what God absolutely forbids, and it is dragging me toward hell. Specific confession strips sin of its camouflage. Call it what God calls it.
Give us some specific examples of how this hidden bait works in daily life. Because sin is such a shapeshifter, it disguises itself so well.
Let's take anger. The bait of anger promises you control. It tells you that if you lash out, you will establish boundaries, people will respect you, and you will get your way.
It feels powerful in the moment.
It does. But the hook hidden inside that bait produces total destruction of relationships and alienates you from the grace of God. Or take envy.
Envy is a sneaky one.
Envy promises a sense of justice. It tells you that you deserve what your neighbor has, and feeling bitter about their success is a form of balancing the scales.
Like you're evening things out in your head.
You think you are protecting your own worth, but the hook produces deep, rotting misery in your own bones. You cannot enjoy what God has given you because you are obsessed with what he gave someone else.
And what about materialism?
Materialism presents itself as security and wisdom for the future, but it is actually the bait of greed that chokes out generosity and reliance on God. You have to ask yourself every single day, what is this desire promising me, and what is the hook hidden inside the bait?
It is a massive contrast that we have exposed today. On one side, you have the deceptive, death-bearing womb of human desire, constantly luring us out to take the bait, constantly promising life and delivering a grave.
Yes.
On the other side, you have the life-giving, grace-secured rescue of Jesus Christ, the second Adam who took the death we spawned and gives us his perfect life. The contrast is total.
That is the dividing line of humanity. Every person listening falls into one of two categories. Which lineage do you belong to? Are you trusting in your own righteousness, which means you are still in the lineage of death? Or have you been transferred into the lineage of grace by the cross of Christ?
For you listening, you cannot rely on your own willpower, your New Year's vows, or some secular self-improvement program to fight an internal executioner.
It won't work.
Those things are like putting a Band-Aid on a massive internal hemorrhage. You cannot outthink a corrupt heart. Your only hope is fleeing to the baitless conqueror of sin for a new heart and the life of the Holy Spirit.
Flee to Christ. He is the only safe harbor. He is the only one who broke the genealogy of death.
We started this deep dive talking about the muddy waters of diagnosis and our tendency to blame everything but ourselves for our failures. So I want to leave you with the final lingering question to mull over this week.
A really important question.
The next time you face a severe trial or frustration, whether it's a financial hit, a relational conflict, or an unfair situation at work, ask yourself, are you looking at that trial through the lens of God's refining grace, trusting that he is using it to build your faith? Or are your own desires quietly interpreting that trial as a justified excuse to take the bait?